Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. This is the Chax Chat podcast, and my name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor and one of the accessibility wizards here at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am one of the other senior trainers here at Chax Training Consulting, and Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists. And if you'd like your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications and get yours. They have the WAS, the ADS, which is Accessible Document Specialist, the CPAC, and if you get a couple of different certifications, you might even end up with the CPWA, which is CPAC and Web Accessibility Specialist. So, head on over there and get your cred, man. Get your cred.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So how are things going, Dax?
Not too bad. Koi are doing well. It's getting toward fall, so my water's a little green. Guess what I found out, Chad? I went to usually it's the UV light that you need to go change. I found out you have to change it once a year. And so I go over to my UV filter, which is basically this big black tube. You unscrew the end and you pull out this really long light that's about 36 inches long. I unscrew the tube, I go to pull it out, and I hear chink, 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 chink. Like, oh, that's not good. It was broke in like 3 different places. And so I had to kind of shimmy the glass out, and it doesn't go into the pond. It's all in a sealed tube. But the bottom line is the reason why my pond has been getting greener is because the UV filter is not doing its job because the light's been burnt out. So I don't know how long that's been, but yeah, now I got to go buy another $100 light.
So does it lose its effectiveness?
Yeah, so it has at least a 30 to 40% drop in effectiveness of killing bacteria or killing the algae over time throughout the year. So you get about 9,000 hours of time out of one bulb, and then it's time to change it. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, didn't know.
So, no.
All good. So easy thing to fix. Thankfully, though, of course, the glass didn't break in the water. It's just in its own little sleeve. But yeah, all good. Koi are doing great. Everybody's wonderful and getting ready to probably in another month or two, water's going to start cooling down and they'll start going into hibernation mode where they won't be as active. I'll stop feeding them and they won't eat at all from like December or maybe late November through March almost. Yeah. When the water drops below 55 degrees, you really don't want to feed them and cause some health issues. So yeah.
And it gets that cold where you are?
Oh yeah. California at night, we get into the early 40s. So like 42, 43, and the water in the pond, even though it's sort of insulated because it's halfway below ground, will get in the 55-ish, 54-ish range.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool.
So, yep. Awesome. Well, today we're going to talk about the most misunderstood features of Adobe Acrobat. That is the lesson for today. There are lots of things we see people misusing or misunderstanding what the purpose is, or maybe just not even knowing that it's a thing. And so we're going to talk about what some of those are.
Yeah. So the first thing we wanted to talk about today was using the tags tree correctly, right?
Yeah.
Anybody who's doing this kind of work, you open up a document inside of Acrobat, and you'll notice now on the right-hand side, if you're using the old interface, the tags tree would be on your left-hand side. But regardless, whichever one you're using. In Acrobat, there is a tags tree pane, right? And the tags tree's job is to show you how your content is tagged within your document, as well as show you the order in which those items will be read in that document as well. Yep. Now, the interesting thing about the tags panel or just tags in general is I always say this, they're kind of imaginary things. right? Like they're not really physical things that if you delete them from the tags tree, nothing's going to happen to your document, right? Nothing visually is going to happen to your document.
Sure.
The analogy I always use with tags is I say, imagine I walk into a room with a stack of sticky notes and I start writing on the sticky note what things are, and I put the sticky note on that object. That's kind of the principle of tagging things, right? So if you remove the tag, the object is still there. It's just that it's not going to be identified to many assistive technologies, right?
Yep.
So, there's that fundamental principle that's worth understanding when you're working with the tags tree. But that's not to underlie the importance of the tags tree, because it's really what JAWS and NVDA requires in order to appropriately read the content in your document.
What's interesting about that, Chad, is I find people who migrate from web accessibility, HTML, to document accessibility will use the tags tree incorrectly. And you will open up the document and look at the tags, and you will see an H tag, lowercase h, the number 2. And then inside the H tag, you will see another tag and another tag. And they start nesting all of this structure, thinking that a tag is just like the HTML versions where you have some inside the other and everything has a child-parent relationship. Now, that's not to say that a tags tree doesn't have that, because it does, but only in container tags and some complex compound elements like lists and TOC and things like that. But it's not like a heading is the parent item, and then the paragraphs on that page go inside the heading. And then if there's a list, the list goes inside the paragraphs. They're all their own objects, and they all can sit inside a section tag or a part tag or a document tag or an article tag. Those are the containers that things get dumped into. But often when I see someone coming from HTML world, they want to treat it like it's HTML tags, and that could be a problem.
Yeah. I mean, where I've seen that, similarly to what you're describing, I've seen people nest tables inside of tables.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can help you there. If you're nesting tables inside tables,
I know.
Here's your helmet. I'm sorry. Probably but not going to help you.
That's a very common technique in the web world, right? Yes. Especially people who do HTML email, right? It's very common to kind of have a table inside of a table cell, right? And on occasion I've seen that in PDF files, and I'm just like, whoa, we gotta pump the brakes on this one, because we're going down a rabbit hole you're not going to be able to climb back out of. PDF structure doesn't work that way. And if you were to ever try to test that with a screen reader, you're not going to have a very good result. So,
well, it reminds me of front page 97, dating myself way back when I first started learning HTML. Front page 97, everything was inside a table. You had frames, right? You had these frames, and then you would put a table as your main page, your main object, and then you divide the table into 3 columns, and you'd have a left column for your menu, and the center column for your content, and then a right column for your sidebar, and then you'd break the bottom to have a footer. I mean, there was like, you would just use it like a frame, right? And then it would break certain times. And then there's the whole divs came out, and it became, we are no longer bound by the table, and you could use a div. And, of course, divs still exist today, and so do tables, but yeah, whole different way of designing. So all that to say, guys, the tags tree is linear, and it is a representation of what's on the page. But the content pane is the pane that actually holds the object. And if you delete something from the content pane, you delete it from the document. It's no longer there. And so it is definitely a little bit of a tricky, as you would say, a little bit of a sticky wicket to learn where to do what. So.
Well, I find the content pane, I mean, it all depends on the type of work you're doing, but one of the ways that the content pane can be pretty helpful is if you've got a document where in the source, the user liked to add an extra return between paragraphs to create vertical space.
Sure.
Right. And you and I know that, when you do that, the user has to navigate a bunch of empty tags in the document. Again, is it a significant barrier? I guess that's up for debate, but it's not a great user experience, right? Because they're going to continuously have to go through these empty tags. And so in the content pane, what's kind of cool is if you walk the content tree, you'll see those returns get highlighted.
Sure.
And you could just hit the delete key and it vanishes them from the document. And it also removes it from the tag structure because the object is no longer there. So it no longer needs to be tagged. So it's kind of a convenient way to clean up your document. I wouldn't want to do it for a 300-page document, but for the couple page documents, when they did that, it's kind of a nice way to clean up the document and really, get it a little bit more under control, and provide the user with a better experience.
Yeah, I would absolutely open. That's where I would open my copy of Common Look, and I would just use Common Look's tool and remove all those hard returns in one shot rather than doing it. But I think if there were only a few, if it was a 1-page document and I'm just doing some final critique to it and I don't have to do a whole lot of extra stuff, then yeah, the content pane, going in there and just deleting out those extra objects is an easy way to kind of make that happen.
Well, and as you and I know, I mean, not everybody has Common Look. Right?
True. We have the luxury of having lots of different tools at our disposal. And, if to your point, it is annoying to have to hit the down arrow extra times as you navigate a document, but I don't think someone's going to be taking you to court for extra hard returns in the document. So It's about cleanliness and creating a good user experience. And we talk about this all the time, the good, better, best. It is a better user experience to not have all those hard returns.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up, because we literally just got done recording our previous podcast where Dax was talking about the good, better, best experience, right? And I would say if you took the time to go through and clean that up, you would now be going from good to better, right?
Yes.
You'd be improving your situation. But yeah. So, and there's other times when maybe you're trying to do something specific to an object. I mean, it's not very often where I'm asked to delete an object from the page. Every now and then, though, it happens, right? People are like, oh, can you get rid of that logo on page 3, and content pane is a great way to do it, right? All you got to do is kind of walk the content tree until that element gets highlighted and just hit the delete key and it's gone, right? So in some cases, it can be helpful. That's not really an accessibility property, just more of a need to do, type of feature. Yeah.
Well, there are times where something doesn't get tagged. And in a document, you highlight an item and you can go into the tags tree and say, create tag from selection. And when Acrobat has to figure out how to extract that thing that you selected, make a new tag for it, sometimes it will get the layers wrong because it might have been in with another object, and you'll end up with a layer that maybe gets pushed to the front or pushed to the back, and it messes up a transparency. That can be where you can go into the content pane and readjust those layers so that you get your tagged item, but you also push that transparent element back. But I have run into instances where it separates something that two objects that should have always been stayed together, and I can no longer get the transparency back the way it was. And that's why we always say, save often. Give yourself a copy 2 or 3 times. When you start moving around stuff and you start playing with that content pane, give yourself a fallback of a saved version of the document before you start playing with it. Because if you get going down that road, you really can paint yourself into a corner where you're not able to get out of it again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's generally good advice. Like there's certain areas in a PDF that I go that I don't want to go there until I've saved a version of my document.
Yep.
Just to give me an exit strategy, right? So, because as you pointed out, Dax, the content pane is also the stacking order of the content in your document.
Right.
However, it's flip-flopped from what you would expect it to be in InDesign or Illustrator or Photoshop, right? So in the content pane in Acrobat, the topmost items in the list are the further back. I'm trying to like demonstrate this with my hands, but the further they are in the list, the further back they are in the document, right? So, and that's opposite of InDesign, Illustrator, Photoshop. It's completely backwards, but it kind of is what it is. But yeah, so just something to keep in mind as you start working. So always, when I'm working in these files, I'll often have like an R1, R2, R3. And so if I ever get too far and I'm like, oh, I really messed this up, just either close it and don't save or trash it and go back to the previous version.
So I would say, now that we brought this up, some of the times where I am, because I'm sure some of our listeners going, yeah, but what are those times, Chad? Tell me when should you do that? And I'll give you the first one and I'll let you chime in. But if I'm going to be editing a table structure, I'm going to be changing a TD or a TH or moving some rows around or messing with the table structure, I always save a version out so I have something to fall back to. What's another area where you might save another document?
I mean, listen, anytime I have to do extensive editing, at all. I think the table is a good example. With the tables, we often run into, especially in Adobe InDesign, where if a table spans more than one page, in the table structure, you'll get multiple T bodies. Now, That's technically not a problem. The pack checker is not going to flag that as an issue. For me, it's just not logical. Like I would prefer that all of my rows be in one T body, just so my table is well structured and it makes sense to me. But conversely, you'll find there are times when you output a table and there's only a T body.
Sure.
Right. So maybe your table only has row headers. And for various reasons, when it outputs, it'll put all the rows in one T body. The pack checker flags that, because if you have a T body, it wants to have a T head. Yeah. And if it's missing, it kind of throws up a flag. So I'm trying to think of like when else. I mean, I do it so often, right? Honestly, I do.
Sure.
I'm always just like, what, before I dive into this, I'm going to save it. That way I because I've done it too many times where I've gone too far and I've lost work, and nothing frustrates me more than when I lose time.
Anytime I go in the pre-flight panel to run any of the pre-flight fix-ups, I always do a save. So, because you can globally change something in your document that you might not want to. And so, like, one of the pre-flight fix-ups that we run is when you have bullets that are of a bunch of different varieties, diamonds and squares and all sorts of stuff, you can tell Acrobat in the pre-flight fix-up to, hey, mark all of my unordered lists as bullet. I don't care what the symbol is, just make it say bullet. But you and I both have talked about this before. The bug there is it doesn't know the difference between an unordered list, a UL, and an ordered list, an OL, which in HTML, there is a different tag for each one. But in a PDF, there's just an L and an LI. And so it doesn't know one is different than the other. So I've inadvertently, I scan through the document really quick and say, oh, there's no numbered lists. And I run the fix up and I save the document back. And then I find somewhere on page 38 or 126, there's a whole series of numbered lists and they've all been marked as bullet, 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 bullet. And I have to go back and manually edit them. So whenever I start to use a pre-flight panel for anything, I always save a version out. That way I just have a fallback point to where if I make a mistake or I need to go back, I can.
Well, it's funny you say that because the pre-flight panel makes you save a copy anyway,
Right.
right? Every time you run a fix up, it says, okay, what do you want to save this as? Now, I typically just overwrite the old one, right? Which is a
Yep.
bad habit, right?
Exactly. I'm shaking my head. For those of you watching this, I'm going, nope, not me. I always save as something else.
Yeah, like I'll often just overwrite the old one, and that is kind of a bad habit that I've adopted. But it is a good idea to just kind of like, again, when it pops up, I'll add R1 or R50 or however many versions I have, just so that I have a backup.
Yeah. Mine is always R99 or 9999 or 9. I just keep adding nines to it because I forget what number I'm actually on. So,
yeah. Or you'll add the word final to the end.
Oh, I try really hard.
And then you do
that.
final,
yeah,
and
exactly.
final for sure this time.
We're going into the meme category here. One of the other things I do also is when I'm going to edit PDF. If I go to the PDF edit tool where I'm going to change a typo or a piece of text, it's a crapshoot still. There's no definitive answer as to whether it's going to preserve my tag or break it apart. There's no way to really know. So, I mean, there is some way to know sometimes, but for the most part, it's still not consistent. And so I'll save a version out before I do edit PDF. So that way, if it breaks too many things that I can't fix, I've got a fallback point.
Yeah, my overall guidance is just don't use edit PDF, right? I mean, it's just, it's not good. I mean, I've used it already. It's very few times, but like on occasion, I'll need to move an object for whatever reason it is, and typically moving an object, I don't think will mess with your tag structure.
No, not at all.
I think
you're only okay when you edit.
But if you edit the text in an object, it'll almost always obliterate your tag structure. And you can recover from it. It's just not much fun, right? I mean, because you kind of have to find the elements. You could either use the content pane like we were just talking about and create tag from selection, but it's not a fun process.
Well, the other tool that breaks is the read order tool, right? So you could use the content. I use the content panel more because I can select something in the content panel and then tag it. But because I hate, I literally have thrown things again across the room when I'm using. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do what Chad does. I'm going to use the read order tool to tag my stuff because it's just easier. And I'll do it. I'll be like, fine. And then all of a sudden, boom. It just stops working. And I'm like, son of a biscuit. I just want to just scream to, and drive down to Adobe. Literally, I drove by their office yesterday on my way back from San Francisco. But yeah, so I tend not to use the read order tool because unless I'm setting the table summary in a table, because it's the only way, Lord knows why, it's the only way you can set the table summary. Right? I should be able to go in. Now you can actually edit the table summary going into edit attribute object or object attributes. You can go into the tag, but that's really
it's not fun.
That's not for the faint of heart.
It's like dive, and maybe you'll find it. Maybe you'll get lucky. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I've used the reading order panel probably in 3 years. Like, I don't think I've touched it, right? I do not touch it at all. I do use the reading order tool, right? That's typically how I tag content in my document. So I'll marquee it, say tag as heading, tag as P. You're right, though. Every now and then you'll run into that situation where it stops tagging it. And you're like, okay, why? Typically the way I fix that is I'll go into the content pane and go into the last few things that I tagged. And I'll just pull the content out of its container.
Yes.
Delete those empty containers. And then usually it lets you start tagging again. I'm not going to say every time. I can't say every time. But usually it lets you do it.
All right. So we talked about not using the tags tree correctly. We talked about some of the dangers of the pre-flight panel. We've talked about editing your PDF, right? We've talked about the content pane and the read order tool and the read order pane, but we really haven't talked about the role of the reading order versus the content order, right? We have the tag order, which is the order in which JAWS and NVDA read the content. Then we have the content order, which is the structural order of the objects on the page. And then we have the reading order, and the reading order really is something that has existed since before tags existed. It is the PDF stream order that happens in the language of the PDF. Go ahead.
Now I'm a little confused because I feel like you just described 3 orders. And I feel like if I'm confused, our audience is probably confused too. So
there are 3 areas, but 2 orders.
Okay. So I just want to be clear because like I said, if I'm confused, our audience is probably saying the same thing. So fundamentally, there's 2 orders in a PDF file. There's the tag order. That's probably the easiest one to kind of understand. And then the other one is called the reading order. I think some people call it the architectural. What do they call it?
The architectural content order, ACO.
Which is the same as the reading order.
Yes. The content pane and the read order pane are mirrors of each other. If you adjust something in the content pane, it adjusts in the reading order pane. The problem with it is, if you adjust it in the reading order pane, Adobe has decided that they're going to help you and that they're going to try to understand what you were trying to do in the reading order pane. And they're going to play with your tags and merge your tags or split your tags and do stuff to your tags tree. I wish you could lock that feature out. A little checkbox in the preferences somewhere that says, don't allow this to happen.
Well, and I think this is the root of the cause of a lot of this confusion, right? Because you're like, oh, you and I preach this all the time. You got to set your tag order. You got to set your reading order. And somebody says, oh, okay, I got to set my reading order. I'm going to use my reading order pane.
Right.
But we're here to tell you, do not do that, right?
Yes.
Because the reading order pane is probably the most useless pane that exists in Acrobat. As I just got done saying a few minutes ago, I haven't used it in probably 3 years because unfortunately, when you use the reading order pane, it will destroy your tag structure. Not very helpful.
Not always, but yes, I would say more often than not, I've used it and it maybe dropped an empty tag into the thing, but kept everything else okay. But you don't want to have to do that triage. Why should you have to go back and re-inspect your tags tree to try to figure out whether it got it right? The only benefit of the reading order pane is really the reading order tool that turns on object numbers visually so you can see items 1, 2, 3, 4, the order in which it is. So you and I both do this all the time. We teach this in our classes. You open up the reading order tool and switch to the content pane so that you can manipulate objects and see the order in which they're affected. The problem I have with it is the numbers only appear on the objects on the page. They don't appear next to the content list in the elements. And that makes it a little wonky to try to find the object you want. And I mean, you start to get used to it the more you do it, but I wish that it actually listed it just like it lists it in the reading order pane, which is one of the things. So
yeah, it does. It's something that you have to practice and you've got to use it a bit to get used to it. Eventually it becomes a little bit like second nature, right? Yep. But I will say that that's another really confusing component is that there's the reading order tool and the reading order panel. And what Dax and I are telling you not to use is the reading order panel. The reading order tool is still useful.
It used to be called the touch up read order tool. And that was better because at least the name didn't sound exactly the same as another panel.
Agreed.
So.
I almost wish they would have kept that name, because people would often refer to it as the Toro tool, right?
Yes.
The touch up reading order tool. And that was a little bit easier to kind of distinguish from one to the other. But then in a recent update, they just changed it to the reading order tool. So in Acrobat, you have a reading order tool and a reading order panel. Yes. Very confusing, right?
Yep.
And Dax and I are telling you not to use the reading order panel, but the reading order tool is okay to use to tag your content. That's pretty much it.
And to throw salt on the wound, the reading order panel nor the reading order tool is actually the reading order of the actual document. It is only the reading order for things like Adobe Read Aloud or Text Helps Read and Write, or some of these other what we call text-to-speech engines. The true reading order of the tool of your document is the tag order in the tags tree. So JAWS and NVDA, 85% of the market share of the people using assistive technology are using JAWS or NVDA, reads the tag order. But people who use Speechify, Text Help, Dragon Naturally Speaking, several Adobe Read Aloud, those use the reading order. And unfortunately, there's no way to say, match my reading order with my tag order.
No.
It's just not possible because of the nature of how PDFs are created. It was confided into us. Stop asking for this feature. It's impossible to have. It just is what it is.
Yeah. You and I have asked for that many, many times, like, why can't I just say match my reading order to the tag order? And the short answer is because in order for it to do that, it has to adjust the stacking order of objects in the document. And that's almost invariably going to totally screw up the design of your document. Right?
Yeah, there's no way for it to know what is an allowable stack order and what's a violation and what's changing it. So you would do it and you would just get layer spaghetti and you'd be like, what the heck happened? You said you wanted this. Here it is. Good luck with that. So
that's true. That's very true.
Awesome. Well, good session today, Chad. I think this was really a good one. Hopefully this given our listeners some tips and things to avoid, maybe some commisery with some of the own frustrations you've had. And I will say, as a listener, we're really trying to build our YouTube channel. We'd love to hit 1,000 followers on our YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, go do that. Accessibility Unraveled. We're using that @ symbol now. Adobe YouTube allows for the @ symbol in the channels. So we are at A11Y on YouTube, and just look up PDF accessibility or CHACS, and you'll find us. But we'd love to have you as a subscriber. I want to get to the point where we can start doing some of the cool things that you can do once you get to 1,000 subscribers. Like, there's some new stuff we're hoping to get there. So go subscribe, be one of our followers, not just in the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, but help us out on YouTube, man.
Well, I know we've heard from a lot of our listeners who have said they like to listen to us when they're walking their dog in the morning, or, that they're vacuuming their house, or, like things like that. And I love that. I mean, I love that you find value enough that you like to listen to us while you're doing your activities. But, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can always put a face to a name, right? And you can kind of see us, kind of in action, if you will. And we would just appreciate your loyalty in subscribing to that.
I was going to say, we have one listener who says, I love being able to sit on my couch and watch your podcast on my smart TV. It is great. It's like watching the Chad and Dax show. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. I mean, I'm always sitting at my computer watching YouTube, but I do know that it is on my smart TV. In fact, I ask my smart device to do stuff and look up stuff, and invariably I end up stuck in YouTube because it didn't understand what I was asking for. But yeah, you can watch us on your couch listening, watch the podcast. So yeah.
You absolutely can. My friend has the Apple Oculus
Oh yeah, sure.
things, and tonight I'm gonna watch the Metallica concert
Oh
using the
wow.
Oculus phones, and I'm so excited for it. I can't wait to experience that. So
I've tried actually remediating. So I have the Meta Google, the Meta thing, and I've tried opening Acrobat and remediating like what is that, Minority Report style, like using the
oh my
wands to do it.
gosh.
It's not as cool as you think.
Okay.
Initially, it's super cool, like being able to scroll up and throw this and throw that, but it starts to get really tiring. And then it starts to get a little dizzying because your screen is not, if you make it the resolution, you can see everything. It's really hard to get the fine motor control to move stuff around. And if you blow it up to where it's big enough, now you're really zoomed into an area. So you're constantly having to scroll. So while I thought it was cool, it's not something I'd want to do on a daily basis.
Well, I could tell you, like in the Oculus, what's blowing my mind is like you can look at an icon
Yeah.
and it highlights it.
Yep. Yep. Same with
And
the
then
Meta.
you can like
Yeah.
you could pinch your fingers to like choose that option. So
Sure.
like as you're describing this, I'm wondering like could I like organize the tags tree in
You could.
Acrobat? Wow, like that would be
Yeah.
but I could see how it would get tiring, right? Like my arm would get tired. Yeah.
Yeah, with the Meta, you have to use a little joystick, and it's very
Okay.
intuitive. I used to use it to play poker all the time, and you forget that you're actually holding the controls because it just becomes part of your hand. So,
Okay.
yeah, but I could see how it would be more beneficial to just be able to use your hands, and mine is like, I don't know, 5 years old or 4 years old. It's like a version 2 or something. So,
Yeah.
it's probably, there's so many more cameras now and, all that good
Yeah.
stuff. So, well, we digress, guys. We spent the
Yeah.
last 5 minutes here pontificating and closing out the show. Thank you all for being listeners. We really appreciate you.
We do. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, my name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where every other week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.